instead of the camera. First question, say and spell your first and last name and give me your title.
My name is Erika D. White. It's Erika, White, White, and I am a candidate for Ohio State Representative District 42.
Tell us a little bit about what you're out here doing today.
Today we're all connecting with voters. So the most important part, or what we do really good in our campaign, is connecting with voters, and that connection is not by mail pieces, it's not by Facebook. Is actually going out and knocking on doors. So we are a little different in our campaign. Every vote matters. Every voter's voice is important to us. So whether you're a Democrat or you're an independent, undecided, or Republican, we're knocking those doors for those people who vote. So we're looking at voters, not just party affiliation. And we also come out, hey, these are people's homes also that live in apartments and townhouses. So I do take time in my campaign to make sure I'm reaching to those voters also. So if you vote, I'm knocking your door.
It's hard out here, though, with the apartments, especially.
Yeah, it is challenging, and you can understand why then some campaigns they just do mail pieces. I still think it's important to show up and knock a door. Every door needs to be knocked on, especially when we're talking about people that are registered to vote, people that we know are likely voters. They're going to show up to vote. If you're a candidate, if you're anyone running for office, or if you're in office, there is nothing wrong with taking the time and let people know wherever you live, in whatever neighborhood, it's important to try to reach people and knock on their doors.
You announced your candidacy months before Roe was overturned. Were you expecting that? What happened when you heard about this?
You know, when I heard it, I would assume I was like most women. We were expecting that, like when it was released that was going to happen. We hadn't accepted it. So when I say that, you were like, oh my goodness, they've been coming after this for years. And when I say they, different groups that wanted to overturn rights for women, when we're talking about women's reproductive rights, contraceptives, abortion, all that is under one umbrella. So it's not just abortion. We're talking about everything that has to do with a woman's reproductive health and her rights. And I don't think anyone accepted that until it's like someone telling you, you know what, I'm going to push you in the lake. And the whole time you're like, you're not going to push me. I'm like, yeah, you probably are, I get it. But when you get pushed in the lake, it's like everyone has a plan until you get punched in the face. And it's a funny thing that Muhammad Ali says, but it's true in that it is one of the hardest things I've had to deal with is knowing that my daughter, just one generation behind me, will not have the same rights that I do as her mother, nor that her grandmother gained, that it's already been lost in one generation. And with women, we hadn't yet accepted that. We knew it was going to happen. We heard what was going to happen, and we were, how do we stop this? And we did all we could. And when it happened, we realized that we had to accept it, but not, when I say accept it, I don't mean just say, oh, accept what happened, but you don't have to live with what happened. And so women, I mean, I can tell you out knocking on doors, I don't even have to bring the conversation up with both women and men. It doesn't matter what age, they want to talk about that. And so, you know, what we're hearing from the middle, that's where people really are. They're not in these little edges out here. People are really like, hey, they took away women's rights, my daughter's rights, they took away my rights, they took away my child's rights. And so people really want to talk about that. So now that we know we've accepted what's happened, now people are ready to fight back with their vote, with their voice, and really take a stance on rights not being repealed in this country. That's not what America's about. That's not what Northwest Ohio is about. That's not what we're about. It's not our values in a democracy.
So you mentioned that people want to talk about it. Did you actually see like a major shift in the conversations post the Supreme Court's decision?
Yeah, I did. I would say when I was out walking before, it was more like, hey, we want to talk about inflation. People still want to talk about that. They want to talk about gas prices. They wanted to talk about COVID and the pandemic and how they've been doing. And all of a sudden that shifted where women's rights, what is happening to women in this country, and when we're seeing it being shifted to states, it rose to the top. So, and I guess the most surprising thing is, it's not surprising, but it is because we live in Northwest Ohio, is the amount of men who want to have that conversation. And they always say respectfully, I want to say that I understand, or respectfully, we've got to do something. The other thing that's come to the top, not only women's rights, workers' rights, but voting rights. I've talked more about fair maps I re-educated myself at least 5 or 6 different times, but you also are going to doors where you think people don't know this, and there are some very educated voters that know what is going on, and they're concerned about the direction of this country.
You mentioned the districts. What are you happy with the way the lines are drawn now? Or
You know, I'll say I am excited to represent District 42. That does not bother me because I believe every voice has every voter has a voice. And when we looked at when people voted for maps, when we go to that, there were Democratic, Republican, and independent voters who said they wanted to choose their representative, not the representative choose them. What I feel has happened, instead of people from in my entire district being able to choose, which they can vote, who best represents them, people were drawn in for them to choose from, and that's not what we do in this country. It should be that should have been more of a compact district that represented where I live at, instead going all the way out to the east side, through the old South End, through the South End, Maumee, Holland, Springfield, Waterville, White House, Monclova, Neapolis, and Swanton. So it's like a finger pointing, but they're all people. And while people in Waterville care about the amphitheater, they still care about women's rights and voters' rights and fair maps, and they care about workers' rights. If you go over to the east side or Old South End, you know what? They care about safety and crime, but guess what else they care about? They care about women's rights and voters' rights. So what you find out in the blessing that's been with this district is I found out that people are people, whether they live in a $500,000 house or a $50,000 house. That people really care about what's happening in this country, and getting the chance to knock on doors and not just send lit or just put things on Facebook or social media allows me to have that real conversation of where people really are in my district. And I'm excited about that. But do I think it's fair? No, but does it mean I'm not going to work for the people that have to deal with what's going on right now in this state with the way lines have been drawn? I'm going to tell you right now, whether you vote for me or not, I'm with you. And if you're standing here and you're deciding if you want to vote for me, I'm for you, because I believe that no matter if it's a D or R, whatever party, I'm not for parties, I'm for people. And I'm making sure, again, when it comes to women's rights, workers' rights, civil rights, and voter rights, that I'm that voice and I'm that person that's going to make sure that I'm unafraid and unequivocally just not going to move when it comes to representing people in my district.
what can you do to fix the maps if elected and you're surrounded by Republicans?
Oh, wow. Now, that's a hard question, isn't it? We know that the maps are going to be redrawn in 2 years. And the thing that we can do to fix the maps right now is to really start a community engagement, even though we've done that. I would say, let me first say this, that people have worked really hard when we knew this. Again, we knew it was going to happen, hadn't accepted it, and we were still fighting. What we have to do now is make sure we elect Supreme Court justices who are for the people, and that's Jennifer Bruner, Marilyn Zayas, and Terry Cook. When we look at that, we want to make sure that if we're going to get rid of corruption in the state and we're really going to start to listen to voters and not corporations and not private interest, if we're really going to listen to the people, and we want to make sure that Ohio stays strong and we keep people. I want my kids to stay here and raise their family. I want to retire in Ohio. I do. If we want to make that happen, we do that by making sure that we elect people who represent people, not partisan and not politics, but people. And that's how it is. So again, it's being really involved in educating those people in my district and letting them know what's happening, not just in my district, but in this area, and making sure I'm involved with what's happening.
So I know you got to go. Let me give you just a few more questions. So
Okay.
On women's health, Democrats and independents, they're all kind of in a different place on this. Like, a lot of them don't just want, everybody kind of just stakes their claim in a different spot. What is your position specifically, and what will you do if elected for women's health?
So let me start by saying this. There's not enough space in the examination room for a woman, her doctor, and the government. So in my position is that I'm working for accessibility and affordability for women to have access to health care and their own reproductive rights, and to have autonomy over their own bodies. When you talk about how people feel about this right, exactly, that's why we're saying you have a choice. So how you feel, and what you said was just so profound. The way I feel may be different from how my mother feels or how my daughter feels when it comes to women's rights, women's reproductive rights, or pro-choice. But the thing is that you should have the choice to decide what's best for you. and we have to trust women. And even though I'm sitting right next to a woman who says, I believe that women should have choice, the way she feels about choice may not be as expanded as mine, or might not be as expanded as the person on the other side of me. But here's what we know, that you should have the choice, whether you're a Democrat, independent, or Republican woman, to say, I have the choice of what's best for me and my body and my reproductive health.
So would you have any restrictions on abortion?
And I just think abortion is just part of it. And when it comes to women's reproductive health, I think we really have to look at women. When it comes to incest and those hard issues, I think there has to be some understanding that every case is not the same, but there has to be access. And so what does that access look like? And we have to listen to our voters. So for me, if you want to know my personal view, it's a little different than how I would feel if I was representing someone else. I feel that if my daughter wanted to decide to have an abortion, then that is her right. And I'm going to support her in that. It doesn't mean that I'm not, and when I say that, people just think abortion. Well, there's a lot that goes into that. There's the mental health that goes into that. Is there something financially I can do to help? Why did you make that decision? Just really helping women. So even though it just sounds like this finality that, hey, I'm having an abortion, I go out, hey, it doesn't happen like that. And we've got to stop giving that narrative. It is a complex, hard decision that women have to decide to make, and it's normally not made by themselves. I mean, we have this thing that women are just out here. No, it's normally with their partner, their parent, or even their person of faith.
So those are your personal. So as a representative, where do you fall on this? Any restrictions?
I don't know if